this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. To the disappointment of many people in my life, I have never been a handyman. It's just not something that I've applied myself to do. You know, there's certain things I can do, but if you're looking for me to hang cabinets in a house, if you're looking for me to hang drywall, I ain't your man. Now, I've been tasked with doing it, and I kind of carry stuff around. I'm a great tool carrier, and, you know, you tell me to go over here, and I grunt, and I say, okay. You know, you tell me to lift, I lift, all that. But I've never been one to do that. But, you know, it's interesting. I can look around my house, and for some reason, I have any number of tools I bought over the years, and I still can't remember, first off, why I bought them. And secondly, you know, why is this Phillips screwdriver inside of my sock drawer? I have no idea, but there it rests. The same thing applies with hammers. I've got a number of hammers, and they're different sizes, different shapes. I know that they serve different functions. Heck, I've even got a sledgehammer. Now, I can use a sledgehammer. I've busted up concrete. I've split wood with it, you know, using a sledgehammer and a metal wedge and homemade wedges. I used to love to split wood. I stayed in shape doing that way, selling firewood as well when I was young. But today we're going to talk about a case that does in fact involve a hammer. It involves a hammer and a young man who mercifully was adopted into a family. It involves a mother who chose to adopt someone. And in the end, it involves her body being found on the side of the road in a trash can. Coming to you from the beautiful campus of Jacksonville State University, I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, I'd break into a chorus of If I Had a Hammer, but I hate that kind of folk music, so I'm not going to do it.
Really?
Yeah, I've never been a fan of that.
So you never had to go to a camp where you sit around the campfire and sing Kumbaya and all that stuff. And If I Had a Hammer, really?
Yeah, if I've done that.
Oh, see, I was always the guy in the back making up my own words that would just, and I mean, some kid would always laugh. Another would always cry. You always know you're winning when you can make one child laugh and another child cry.
There you go.
To the exact same joke.
You're a multi-spectrum kind of person.
And that's what this guy is. Jordan Weems. You know what, Joe? This guy, Jordan Weems, is 16 years old. He was adopted by Spring Weems. Spring is a mom of 5, adopted and biological, okay? And 49-year-old woman who I'm looking everywhere I can just to find one person that would say, I passed by her at school one day and she didn't wave, okay? She wasn't that. She's the person that everybody wanted to be like. And so for her to be a part of this story today breaks your heart. And it started with discipline. She was trying to show Jordan what would happen to him if he continued doing what he was doing. Here's what he did. 16-year-old Jordan and his younger brother. They went out, got in a little trouble, and the police chased them. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs, mainly because the other sibling is young and, you know, minors, they keep all that stuff under wraps. But they got in trouble, enough trouble that the bigger brother bore the brunt of the punishment. And the punishment was this. I'm going to put you in this orange jumpsuit like they wear at county. I'm going to take away your bed and give you a bedroll. And you're going to eat chicken and beans and Franks and beans and things like that they serve. And actually, to be honest with you, that's good jail food if you get that. But that's how and so that was the punishment. And it was in that process that this 16-year-old boy decided to get payback. And the reason we can name the 16-year-old Jordan Weems is he's being charged as an adult for first-degree murder of his adopted mother. Joe, in this day and age where too many times guys our age say parents these days are not, they're not disciplining their children properly. I looked at what she did and I thought, I wish I'd have thought of that. That's a good discipline right there.
It is. And it goes to, I don't know, a broader, because it's a theme that I was living my life before, that I was living in my life before I ever watched the series Seinfeld. And the one episode that's always stuck with me is George Costanza. He's going to do the opposite. And I'd been doing that for years and years and kind of, found out that if I saw somebody that did something where they wound up in a situation that was catastrophic, I knew that if I could do the opposite of what they're doing, I'd probably come out on the right end. As a matter of fact, and it extended to my son Noah, where when we used to go to Braves games all the time in downtown, when they still had the stadium, in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And I remember one day he was asking me about the area that I worked, and I was like, and this sounds very foolhardy for me to do this. I was like, I'll take you to the worst place, one of the worst places I've worked. And we wound up going down the road. We're on the south side of Atlanta, and we wound up in front of the federal penitentiary in Atlanta. If you've never seen this place, it looks like something out of a Batman movie. It's gray, very gothic. It's got this big fence, and it has housed some of the most notorious criminals anywhere in our country, some of the worst crimes you can imagine. And I remember looking at Noah, and he was probably 8 or 9. I said, son, those fellows that are in that place wish that they had a second chance. They wish that they could go back. I said, your slate is clean. And you don't want to wind up in a place like, you don't want to wind up in county, but this is the pinnacle, when you get to this level. And sometimes it's merely just demonstrating to your child what outcomes are. Now, whether or not the child is going to be adherent to that advice, who knows, because, kids have a mind of their own, and you never particularly know what the dynamic is going to be with a mom and a child, or parent and a child inside of a residence where you're trying, the one thing you want to do is make sure you get them out of the house intact with some kind of baseline of morality and some kind of functional skills so that they can thrive, right?
That's a great idea.
And maybe that's what she was aiming for.
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with this in theory.
No, I don't either. I thought, like I told you, not bad. In this day and age where we are telling people don't spank your child and things like that. I mean, you and I both know what it's like to have a shoulder hit a wall, and and you realize that your shoulder does hit the wall right before your head does, and that's always the weird one. You never go head first into the sheetrock. It's always shoulder first. It's like that dent, that hole did not come from my head. That was my shoulder. Yes. But anyway,
you and I come from backgrounds though where it went to extreme. And,
I'm not saying that was good or healthy.
And most people, it's really hard for people to hit a healthy middle ground, I think.
Yeah.
And being a parent doesn't come with an instruction book. All of us are figuring it out on the way along the journey, and you can say, well, I had other kids, I can handle this. Not necessarily, because each kid is their own individual. And so you have to tune into it, man. My
older brother is the reason I exist. I'm not kidding. My older brother, Mike, he is, even now, he is the good guy. I mean, if there's a white hat, he would be in all white. Yeah. This is a kid that, like when he was born, they brought him home from the hospital. He napped the whole way. When they got inside, they said, we're going to eat at this time. And he said, great. He said, how long do I sleep now? Great. That's what he did. And the thing is, so my mom was like, this is perfect. We need another one. I came out with a margarita in one hand, a cigarette in the other, said, let's go.
Let's party, man.
You used to be in charge. And I spent, but here's the thing. 5 years ago, Jordan Weems wrote this to his adoptive mother. Dear Mom, I love you because you are smart, kind, and you are very loving. That's what I love about you. Jordan Weems wrote that to the woman when he was 11 years old. 5 years later, he takes a hammer to her head. And Joe, you mentioned different types of sledgehammer, things like that you may or may not know how to use. Most of us have seen a hammer, and I'm picturing a claw hammer, where you've got the hammer on one side and the claw on the other. And in my head, I'm thinking that is not, I mean, yes, it's a weapon. It can be used as a weapon, but I'm not thinking it's a good weapon. I'm thinking you would have to do a lot of damage with that in a bunch of different areas for it to be effective as a killing tool.
Well, yeah. And okay, let's qualify that by saying it can be an effective weapon in the hand of someone that knows how to use it. And as a matter of fact, there are weapons such as hammers that have been used in warfare going back millennia. And, if you go to the Armament Museum over in Great Britain, and, you see some of the medieval accoutrement that they have over there, some of these weapons are absolutely ghastly. It's just that over the period of time, we use firearms now most of the time, but when you see the things that men have invented over the years and the utility that they have, and just so that we know, when you're talking about a hammer, the utility of a hammer, it is certainly a bludgeoning object. When we talk about bludgeoning, right, we're referring to a discussion that we've previously had, I think many times, and I think I even did an entire lecture on air about blunt force trauma. And it's a topic that's always fascinated me because it just goes, there's any number of directions that it can go in. But hammers in particular are interesting because, in particular, a claw hammer. So, when you think about the business end of the hammer, and what I'm talking about is that flat head where you're actually using it to drive a nail into a board or a wall or whatever it is that you're using it for. It has very specific utility. Sometimes, and I urge anybody to do this that hasn't taken a look at it, if you have a hammer around your house, check and see if it's textured on the business end of it, because some of them are actually textured with these they almost look like little hash marks on them. And I think that some manufacturers believe that prevents any kind of slight slippage when it strikes like the head of a nail. Okay. Interestingly enough, if it's being used as a bludgeon, guess what? You have a pattern that will be transferred onto the skin, and you can make that out. There's with blunt force trauma, there's a lot of friction that's created because you're literally tearing the skin. That's where, we talked about in our when I gave the lecture on sharp force injuries. We talk about that a laceration is not a sharp force injury. It's a tearing injury associated with blunt force trauma. So that friction creates this kind of ripping of the skin. Now, what can happen also, if you just have a smooth surface, you can also have a friction abrasion on there as well. And if you clean the wound where it makes point of contact on the skin, you'll actually see it almost looks like what you would see with a skinned knee. Okay, it's kind of abraded, but it very well might have a circular pattern. And that circular pattern not only applies to the skin, okay, but it also applies to the external table of the skull. So that injury can transfer. I've actually brought hammers into the morgue where we had hammer attacks. And once we got the scalp reflected, and what that means is that when we dissect out along the top of the head and the scalp is peeled away from the skull, the underlying external table of the skull demonstrates these strike points. And Dave, I have seen, and I'm qualifying this beforehand, all right, I'm going to use the term beautiful here. But if you're trying to demonstrate for court, there are bad examples and there are beautiful examples, and because these things pop on screen, all right? So if you can show an image just of a skull at autopsy where the scalp is reflected, you've cleaned it up, there's no blood, but you kind of see a plug shape that applies. And when I say plug, it's about the size of a quarter, depending upon the manufacturer of the hammer, about the size of a quarter. And it kind of drives the bone into the underlying brain. And that's where, you start to get into real problems here. The bone itself will fracture. You'll have a circular fracture, and then it'll radiate out almost like, let's see, what's a good example of this? It will radiate out almost like a broken windshield if it's struck by rock, and you'll see these kind of spider web, fractures that are associated. And you have the concentric, which means the center of the injury, the concentric strike point, and then you'll have these eccentric lines that kind of radiate out from it. It's really fascinating, what can be done with a hammer and how vicious an instrument is. And listen, that's just the business end of it. If we're talking about a claw hammer, this is a completely different injury. And sometimes it can be misinterpreted as well, because when the claw, if you flip it around, okay, and the claw is actually used as the striking weapon, you will get these very nasty injuries that almost look like a beaver has inserted his teeth into the soft underlying skin. And if it latches on, the skin will actually peel away as the perpetrator draws again for another strike. Well, Dave, I hope I didn't, scare you to the point where you're running, screaming off into the night. That was not my intention. But I think that everybody needs to understand how vicious an event like this is. And, just kind of, thinking back to the evidence that's left behind by Hammerhead. This is kind of fascinating too. I won't linger on this point too much. I've actually had people where a hammer has been rotated. If you think about a hammer being rotated and it's kind of in profile, okay, they've held the hammer that way.
Wow.
And struck down. And I've seen these patterns that it literally looks like the silhouette of a hammer in a laceration where it's kind of abraded along. I mean, you can make out all the little points along the way. You can see.
There are some angry people in this world, if you can say that.
There are many angry people. And,
wow.
A hammer again falls into a category, Dave, of a weapon of convenience. Now, you remember what I said about the medieval weapons, right?
Right.
Now, if you're talking about, because there are these, things that people build, now in these fantasy constructs that they have, and some of the stuff is based on medieval weaponry. If you brought something like that to bear, that's not a weapon of convenience. A weapon of convenience is anything that you have at your fingertips inside of your home, something that can be reached for, kind of like, I don't know, Professor Plum with a lead pipe in the conservatory, right?
Right.
Lead pipe was not made to kill people with, okay, but yet it can be utilized that way. The hammer itself, though the carpenter hammer is not made to kill people, it's a highly, highly effective weapon, Dave.
When this story first came out, you were on it right away.
Yeah.
And you sent it to me and said, hey, take a look at this. And I first started when I'm watching this, I'm going, there's got to be more to this. I mean,
yeah,
there always is, but we're dealing with some young people here. 16 is very young. What we're actually dealing with is beyond just the 16-year-old. We're also dealing with the involvement of older and younger siblings. What actually transpired with the life and death of Spring Weems. Spring is 49 years old, beautiful woman. She'd been married to a man named Levi. They divorced. They're on decent terms, though. They had 2 children together, but it just didn't work out for them. So Levi would see the children regularly. When one of the boys, they only use the initials of the 2 youngest children, TW and AW, because they're minors. The reason we can use Jordan's name, even though he is only 16, in Oklahoma, he's old enough to be an adult and he's being tried as an adult. So that's why we have his name, but not the other children. So we have AW, TW, the younger brothers of the adopted Jordan. Now, one of the boys had gone to stay at a friend's house during a snowstorm. Pretty cool thing to do when you're young, you know?
Oh, yeah. You kidding me?
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah,
and Oklahoma, I don't picture, this is just outside Oklahoma City. I don't picture Oklahoma City as getting a lot of snow. I kind of picture them like
they
us.
They can get hammered. Yeah. They can get hammered. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Didn't know that. Good. Yeah. All right. Well, then we have younger sibling AW returns home after being at a friend's house during a snowstorm, and he's looking for his mom. Jordan is home with the other sibling, TW, and I don't know, where is she? So Jordan comes up with the story of, well, mom went to our older sister's house to help care for her newborn baby. Got a new baby. All right, that's fine, you know, but, you know, you've got a little kid, you've got a child here who's a minor. He's been away at a friend's house. He wants to talk to his mom. So he tries calling her. She's not answering the phone. Tries to go in her bedroom, see if there's any sign of anything. Her door's locked. Her car's here, and I can't get her on the phone. So AW calls dad. Hey, dad, have you talked to mom? No. Well, he tells him the same story that Jordan told him. And Levi starts thinking about this. Okay. Anyway, that's on the 27th. So Levi's trying to find, has anybody seen her? He reaches out to the daughter, who is supposed to be, you know, that's where Mrs. Weems has gone, right? I hadn't seen her. Wait a minute. Jordan, you told us that your mom went to help her older sister with the baby, and she's not there. She hasn't seen her. Somebody's telling a story now. Levi doesn't get the answer he's after, but AW, the boy who was away on the snowstorm, and TW, who was at home with Jordan, something's not right. Levi and AW, they're talking back and forth and like, man, TW's not acting right, man. Something's not right. Well, after they talk, Levi leaves. A neighbor calls. Jordan and this other son, TW, they're fighting. They're fighting in the yard. So now Levi comes back. They call the police. I mean, it's a whole thing. And that's when, now we're into the day of the 28th now, okay? This has gone on for a 24-hour period where they don't know where mom is. AW comes home. TW is there with Jordan. They're fighting. Dad comes in. He is not Jordan's dad. He's not Jordan's adoptive dad. He's just AW and TW's dad.
Right.
I know this gets a little confusing, okay?
I'm following you, brother.
Where is Spring Weems? I want to know where Spring Weems is. She's 49. She's got 5 kids. Come on. Somebody tell me where she is. Can't find her. So sheriff's deputies come in and take a missing persons call. They take it. They look around. Her car's here. Door's locked. Get her phone. Okay. We'll report her missing. All of a sudden, Levi and AW take TW off to the side. You want to stay here, man? TW, you've been here with Jordan for a couple of days. Mom's gone. You want to come with me? You seem like something's not quite right.
Uh-oh.
He's afraid. He says, yeah, hey, well, do you know what happened to mom? Yeah, I do. Talk to us. Jordan killed her with a hammer and put her body in the trash can. What? Where's the trash can? Down there by the road, waiting on the truck to come and get it. Boom, they're on the phone with cops. Y'all coming back. They hadn't even got back to the station yet to do the missing persons report. And they turn around and come back, and that's what had happened. So the body of Mrs. Weems, Spring Weems, is in a trash dumpster by the road, Joe, where you have your old hamburger meat and everything else. I'm hoping that from that scenario, you can tell us what happened, from what would take place. How do you go with you've got a beaten body in this thing. You've got a 16-year-old, and I don't picture a 16-year-old as being a criminal mastermind. So I don't picture him as being able to cover it up really well.
No. And first off, I want to say something about those 2 little boys. All right. Assuming they're boys. I guess they are.
They are.
AW and TW.
TW,
right?
yeah.
Dave, do you have any idea how lucky they are to still be alive?
Yeah.
Think about that just for a second. If what they're saying is accurate, this could have wound up as an all-out massacre in this house. And it's mind-blowing to me. Okay, so...
Oh, yeah. Hey, let me back up real quick. Just to add, I want to add one last little thing to all this.
Please. You got me on the edge of my seat here. This is...
The reason we know what actually transpired...
Right.
Jordan confessed. That's why they charged him.
On it.
That's why they charged him with first-degree murder. But what they're going to have to do, you've taught me this. Police are still going to have to prove that he took a hammer and beat her to death. And he says that after she fell on the ground, he kept pummeling her with his fist. What kind of rage does it take to beat somebody? And you're going to have to describe this for us because I can't quite understand what took place. But we know it all happened, and we know it was done by a 16-year-old boy.
So let me get this straight. He's saying that it was a combination of a hammer and his fist.
Yeah.
After she was on the floor. He's running down at this point? Wow. Okay. So, all right. So, I've had people beaten to death by bare hands before. That does happen. But those types of injuries look completely different than hammer injuries. So it's going to be important to get that sorted. And here's the thing. What came first, the hammering or the punching? It sounds to me like he's saying hammering came first and then punching followed. I really wonder if he was just kind of acting out in rage, afterwards, continue. And what I mean by that is that after she is deceased, he continues to pound on the deceased, and what kind of injuries would be generated, relative to her. Now, if she was and we've talked about antemortem, perimortem, postmortem, if she's in a perimortem state, there would in fact be hemorrhage perhaps in those areas where he struck with a bare fist, but the patterns that a hand leaves behind are not necessarily going to be very definitive, particularly if you're talking about a fist. And if he is punching into wounds, okay, this is even going to mask this further. What's going to be very important is to see, and I've always been fascinated by this in the morgue, from a scientific perspective, of course, is there is this weird delineation that you see with mass trauma like this, where when you clean the wounds up, and we actually do a dissection of the wounds, like you'll take your scalpel blade and make an incision into an area, say that's been, like a lacerated area, and you can see like a full thickness hemorrhage that starts at the top, okay, up at the epidermis. It goes all the way down to, right into the muscle. You can begin to dissect. People always ask me about sequencing, right? It's like Idaho, people want to know, sequencing, not just with the victims, but what sequence were any of those victims stabbed in? And that's very hard to tell. However, the one thing you can do is you look for where hemorrhaging ceased in the following wounds. You can say this is before and after, right?
Oh, okay.
If you've got someone that is, handing out fists or using a hammer, where you have hemorrhage in those areas, you'll have an appreciation for the hemorrhage in there, but every now and then you'll get to that kind of milky line there where the injuries stop having any hemorrhage. And, one of the big questions I think that probably, crime scene investigators, detectives, but I think probably behaviorists that would look at this, why are you doing this? What's the rationale for continuing to pummel this woman after she's down? And we're going to hear all kinds, I think, probably as this case develops, we're going to hear all kinds of explanations. We're going to hear things about pent-up rage and just on and on, broken homes,
Yeah.
you name it. They're going to parade everything out in this case. It is fascinating, though, that he did roll over on it. I think because he's so young, any defense attorney worth their salt is going to try and mitigate what he said by virtue of his age. Now, I know he's being charged this way, but if he gets the attorney, if they get this in front of a sympathetic judge, we could be looking at something completely different. But herein rests the big question. What will the science tell us about the scene? Dave, there's essentially three major areas that I'm interested in at the scene. First off, the overall house, every room in that house, okay, including bathrooms, all right? Okay. Because in bathrooms in particular, or sinks, we might find evidence of a cleanup, okay? Right. And that could mean taking out the drains, any number of things, running cameras down into drains. I've seen that done before. And if you're talking about using a bludgeoning object, they actually have trace elements of skin many times and tissue that are literally peeled off, with a strike. And if that has been washed, it can go down into a drain. If it hasn't gone too far, you can perhaps find it. Then the specific space where the attack took place, because I have no doubt in my mind that there is going to be blood deposition at the scene. I'm not talking about bloody footprints here. What I'm talking about is you're going to see cast off with this, because if she is struck to the point where we've heard, Dave, can you read that description to me real quick? You had this great description in your notes about the condition of Spring's head, I think, and her face perhaps. And it's absolutely ghastly. I got to tell you, what
her head and face were deformed in this attack. And I was trying to find the best way of putting it without being gross, because I was trying to picture something that is not something one can fathom. I mean, it's just it's not something we're used to seeing. And in looking at this, they said that the massive damage to her face and her head by the victim by a blunt object, deforming the head and face of the victim, causing her apparent death. When you have deformed the face, Joe, and deformed the head. Yeah. I'm thinking in Men in Black, the third one, when he takes the iron skillet and he's beating the guy in the Chinese restaurant and he beats his head flat, and then the antenna pops up.
So relative to this, I want to see the space where this took place specifically. And I'm going to come back. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to tell you that was the other thing. It said that apparently police are saying this now, that they call it an ambush, a surprise attack in the kitchen.
Oh, okay.
That he was in the kitchen. Jordan Weems is in the kitchen, and his mother came upon him in the kitchen where he ambushed her. Now, I know that where all of our kitchens are laid out a little different, there would be an area in my kitchen where you could actually hide and not be seen. If somebody were to come in, you could ambush them, in my kitchen. But I'm thinking of a 16-year-old creating such a massive bloody mess, the physicalness of what it takes to do that. But I'm thinking of the blood. I'm thinking of cast off. I'm thinking of blood on the ceiling. On the, because you're drawing back with the hammer, even, if it's just the hammer, think of the cast off going from up the wall, ceiling, and back behind you It's got to be everywhere, Joe.
It would be. And hammers in particular with those kinds of surfaces, Dave. Hammers in particular, when you have a strike, again, I go back to, when we're teaching kids at Jack State about cast off. It's like dipping a paintbrush into a bucket of paint and kind of flipping it over your shoulder, and you'll get these big arcing patterns that, have a central point of origin. And this is going to be very dynamic. She's not going to go down probably with the first strike. She'll scream. She'll have that pain impulse. She'll react to it, and she will move. So when she moves, the attacker moves. People think that many of these things happen in a static moment. And look, she very well may have been knocked down to the ground, but even being knocked down to the ground is completely different than being standing up straight or upright when you're initially struck. So that attitude changes as the physical attitude changes. And so it's going to manifest itself differently. The more she's struck, the more tearing of the skin. Again, that's a laceration. And the more blood that will be produced. You can actually strike somebody initially with a heavy instrument, and you might not even break the skin. Now, there'll be damage done. Okay, don't misconstrue what I'm saying here. But you don't necessarily tear the skin with that first strike. And they've done some studies, I think, with pig carcasses relative to this over the years to see how much force it would take and what type of instrument, this sort of thing, to actually break the skin with blunt force trauma. So every time, and you're not going to hit the same spot every time either, okay, because you've got somebody that obviously doesn't want to be struck. They're reacting to pain. They're coiling up, they're trying to get away. And I'd really be curious to know if all of the strikes on her body were in totality the head. One of the other things about wielding one of these things, you create this incredible lever with your arm and holding the hammer. And so it's very nonspecific. Okay. So even though you might think you're going to target one area when you're making a downward motion, if the person moves the slightest bit, you're off center. I've had people that are struck on the shoulders. I've had people that are struck on the side of the neck, and you'll see those kind of coin-shaped contusions that didn't necessarily lacerate, but you'll see them there. So you've got a lot of action going on. So I'm going to be very interested in his kitchen because he may not have been aware of his surrounding. So let's think about the surfaces you have in there. You have the countertops, right? You're going to have the cabinets in there, and then the ceiling. Maybe there's curtains. If she's at the sink, there's curtains at the sink. How many people have curtains at their sink, over there? You can find particulate bits of blood there as well. So they will have to search this thing from stem to stern, looking over all of these surfaces. And it's going to tell a tale because nobody ever gets everything. And I can't imagine a 16-year-old boy being able to get everything at that moment in time. Then I think one of the more critical areas as well, and this might be something that people just kind of blow off in this case, is going to be that trash can. Okay. So when she is placed in that trash can, whoever did this is going to deal with a bloody mess. And I don't know, and I know just for me, we generate garbage at home. Some of it's really heavy, and you're walking out with a bag. Sometimes you will pause with that bag on the edge. After you're using one hand to balance the bag, you've got another hand on the lip of that container that you have to flip up. It'll kind of flip backwards, right? That's with a garbage bag, Dave. We're talking about literally dead weight of a woman who has probably got multiple lacerations that she's leaking, the body is leaking from. There's going to be transfer blood. One of the biggest, you might find this interesting, one of the biggest areas that will transfer from is hair. It's like dragging a dirty mop over an area, and you can't, and listen, the head, if he did this immediately, she's not going to be stiff. She's not going to be rigid. So the head is kind of moving about. The arms are moving about, and he's having to shift weight as he's doing it. And I hadn't even talked about his clothes because he's going to have a tremendous amount of blood transfer onto his clothes, and it ain't going to be his. It's going to be Spring's, okay, if he's the one that did this. grabbing the handle, for all of our friends out there that have curbside pickup of garbage, when you pull that thing down to the road, you literally have to grab hold of those plastic handles and you have to tip it, right? Well, this is going to be very interesting because the body inside of the trash can is going to dictate how this thing is going to roll. What if he has to go up over a curb or something like that? He's having to adjust it. And then he's grabbing this thing in multiple points. So you've got transfer from the hands, unless he's gloved up or he's wearing a rag over his hands or something like that. I don't see this guy as like, he's not Lex Luthor here. He's not an arch criminal here. And even Lex Luthor gets caught by Superman, right? Yeah. So you're going to have these multiple points of contact, all over the surface of this trash can. If he manipulated the body inside of the trash can, he looks at the body and doesn't like the way it's positioned, he's going to put his hands on the body again to adjust it, to push it. And he may have thrown trash on top of it. I hate to say it, that's horribly disrespectful, but on top of Spring's remains, there could be other things placed on top. If he's doing this barehanded, first off, you're going to have perhaps bloody fingerprints that are a completely different kettle of fish than, say, for instance, our deposited fingerprints that we get when just the oils off of our fingers transfer onto a surface. Is something completely different. My big hope here, and I think that they probably did, I hope they saved this trash can. They secured it. As a matter of fact, you know what I would have done if this had been me? And you're going to think I'm a ghoul, but I don't care. Did you know I would not have removed her from that trash can? No way, no how.
Not until you got her back.
Yeah, I would have transferred that body. Once I've established that, yes, I do, in fact, have human remains inside this trash can, what purpose does it serve for me to remove those human remains from that trash can in a non-controlled environment?
It's losing evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you want to take her to a location, either the crime lab, state crime lab, which, by the way, this is in Oklahoma. And I love Oklahoma from a medical legal perspective because they don't have coroners. This is a state medical examiner, and it's regionalized. They were one of the original states to actually have a statewide medical examiner. They don't have coroners there. So they have, they did a fantastic job. For instance, the first thing that pops in my mind is going to be the Oklahoma City bombing. Oh. They were heavily involved in that, and they've got a crack crew of people there, highly respected. If they could take those remains and convey them to that central location, you're going to knock down a lot of the opportunities to smear this evidence or, you would screw up the context by literally picking her up out of the trash can in that environment. If you can get flash photography all inside of that trash can, all on the outside of that trash can, take your time with it, and really, really put your shoulder to the stone as far as processing and collecting evidence of here. It's weird. This kid allegedly went to great lengths to discard and disguise this homicide. Mm-hmm. But in the end, what he did is that he actually preserved evidence. He literally encapsulated the beaten, broken body of the woman who took a chance on him when nobody else would. And this is what she got for it. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.